Hey, babe. This is harder to say than I thought it would be, but I had sex with a hooker. Actually, no, an escort. That sounds better somehow. Before I get into the story, let me just quickly mention the reason why I'm sitting on the ground in a hotel room will be explained in the next video, so I won't go into too much detail about that. So, this pretty much all started with the story that I explained in the last video. That girl that I met on Tinder, and we planned a date, and I ended up going to see her at her work, and turns out that she's an escort and works in a escort club. I don't know what they're called, but anyway, that's how it started, and that got me thinking of like, because back then I'm like, you know what? I won't pay for it, but she doesn't seem to be after that. She seemed to legitimately want to seek someone to date. So why not? I don't judge. And that kind of like percolated in the background, and we didn't get a chance to see each other as I explained in the last video before I left. But I don't know, that was kind of the background because before I never like considered, escorts or whatever. I'm like, I know it's a thing that exists, and I don't remember if I knew there were some in Colombia before I came here, but that event made me realize like, okay, that's a thing. And when I was in Medellin, I matched with another girl on Tinder, and pretty much we matched, and she was like really beautiful, like 10 out of 10 beautiful, and I'm just like, ooh, I really hope that we end up going on a date, because like a lot of the times when you match, it doesn't lead to anything. So I didn't have any expectations, but in the back of my head, I'm like, I hope it works. So she ends up responding, and she's like, hey, do you have WhatsApp? I'm like, sure. So I give her my number. She adds me, or actually, I don't know if she adds me. It's rather like I give her my number, and then the match just vanishes. I'm like, okay, that sucks. So I expect that to be the end of it. But a day later, I think I receive a message on WhatsApp from her. So I'm like, oh, cool. Unfortunately, within like, I don't know, two messages, she's like, I'm an escort. Do you want my services? I'm just like, ah, crap. And I had no intention of actually, you know, hiring her. But I'm like, out of curiosity, I wonder how much it is. So I asked her, and she gave me the different prices. It was like 250 thousand pesos for 1 hour, 400 for two, and 600 for three. And that converts to, I don't know, like 83 Canadian, 150, something like that, and 200 Canadian, something around those numbers. And in the beginning, I'm like, I have no interest whatsoever, but I'm like, out of morbid curiosity, let me just ask more details, like how does it work and everything. And I'm just like, I was like, okay, if I was going to do this, how would it work? So I'm like, okay, I'm in a hostel, so like, how does it work? Do I go to your place or hotel room or whatever? And she gives me like the address is a motel, and I'm like, okay. So I'm just like, I actually start considering it. I'm like, should I do this? Because the thing is, like, the day before, I think that happened, I went out with another girl, and with like the taxi rides there and back, and the like restaurant, and like the activities, and basically it ended up costing me like 220 bucks or 220 pesos. So I'm like, all right, I went on a date, invested a lot of time, a lot of money, and for 30,000 more pesos, so for like $6 more, I could literally have guaranteed sex with a beautiful woman. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, why the hell would I date when, hiring someone to have sex is either a little more expensive, the same price, or in certain cases cheaper? Because after that, I did some research and I realized that there's some of them that are like super cheap. Obviously, the cheaper it is, the riskier it is health wise and probably safety wise, because I'm sure some of them are just kind of like out to rob you. But anyway, all that to say, in the beginning, it was just that one girl, and I'm just like, I'm starting to consider it after going on that date. So I kind of go back and forth for a while, get information just to know, like, hey, if I want to do this, how would it work? How much would it cost? How does it like go down and everything? So I don't remember exactly how I end up tipping over to, you know what, let's do this. But at some point, I realized, like, hey, the whole point of this trip, this adventure, and everything is to have experiences, try new things. And hiring an escort is definitely something new for me. And like, okay, I know enough about her that I know it's not like some cheap like person who's been forced into this and like is doing it kind of against her will, and it's like in very bad circumstances and everything. It's like she has a normal job, she does this part-time to make more money and to pay for like her apartment and her business, and she has like future plans, and this is just temporary. So it's not like I wouldn't feel bad doing this. It's literally like a business transaction. So because of that, I'm like, okay, you know what, let's do this. So I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all out. Screw just 1 hour. I'm going for 3 hours. So ended up costing me, I don't know, I didn't do the exact math, but it's like 600,000 for her services, plus 120 for the room that I had to rent. Plus, turns out there was like massage oil that she said she would bring that she didn't bring, that I had to purchase on site. And she had like one drink. So let's say, I don't know, let's say 800,000 total, which would be around what, 260 Canadian, 270. I don't know. I didn't do the exact math, but something around that. So pretty expensive. But I'm like, hey, this is gonna be the one time in my life that I do this. Let's just go all out. So yeah, just book everything, prepare everything, and it's gonna be. So it was yesterday, the day before that I was supposed to leave. Turns out that I'm not gonna leave for reasons that can be explained in the next video. So anyway, we scheduled to meet at a certain time. So I go there, get the key as instructed, take a picture of the key and send it to her. She's like, okay, I'm going to be there in 1 hour. So I'm in the room pretty much for 1 hour by myself, kind of getting ready in my head. Like, I thought I would be more nervous. And I know myself, like, I've been in situations that are stressful often enough that I'm like, I know I'm the type to stress and I don't want to ruin this experience, especially given how expensive it is. So let's just kind of relax and put myself in the mindset of, you know what, let's enjoy this. So by the time she shows up, I'm like pretty relaxed, still a little nervous, uncertain, because I don't know what to expect. And she shows up, and my first impression is slight disappointment. Not that she isn't beautiful, she definitely is. It's just the way she's dressed. I'm like, for this price, I'm expecting her to be more dressed up, but it's like, I don't know. She was a little dressed down. Still okay, whatever, and everything was fine. And anyway, in the beginning, I asked, like, how does this work? I've never done this before. And she kind of explains it. Of course, it's a little difficult because my Spanish still kind of sucks and her English isn't the best. But we managed to communicate enough that she's like, okay, you pay me up front, and then you get to decide what we do and everything. So we kind of start off slow with dancing and then move on. I won't go into too much detail. That is kind of beside the point, and it's too much information. I've already shared a lot of information about sex in the past, and I don't feel like going into too much detail. It's not really going to add anything to the story anyway. Anyway, so we end up, getting down to business and doing everything that I could imagine, but turns out that 3 hours, way more than necessary. Because the thing is, if you're with someone that you have a connection with, that you actually want to spend time with, okay, yeah, it can last a very long time. But in this case, it's more like a business transaction. There was very little kissing, and it's like there's like you can tell that she's not really bored, but you can tell like she's used to doing this and she's doing it for the money. Like there were times where I could tell like, okay, she's actually enjoying this, but there were periods where it's just like, yeah, okay, this is just, business transaction. Man, there were a few times where she was on her phone and stuff, and I'm just like in the back of my head, I'm like, I'm paying a lot for this. I feel like I should be getting a better service. Also, turns out paid for 3 hours, but she left after 2 hours and 17 minutes. And yes, I timed it. So the moral of the story is, if you're going to hire a hooker, first of all, make sure it's a good one. And I don't mean that like necessarily her skills, just so you're not worried about your health and STDs and things like that. By the way, took all precautions necessary. I did everything I could to protect myself. So I'm pretty sure there's no more risk of having sex with her than having sex with any other random girl that I meet on Tinder. So from that perspective, wasn't that bad. But yeah, very interesting experience. So anyway, what I was saying. So if you plan on doing this, make sure it's someone who's, clean, who takes care of themselves and has, limits and restrictions, because the more they're willing to do in general, the riskier it's going to be. From what I've understood, like, I don't know, this, it's not like I had a ton of experience with this, but anyway. And second thing is, don't book more than you think. Like, start with an hour, and then, if you want to go longer, I'm pretty sure she's going to be like, yeah, sure, let's keep going. So, yeah, that was an interesting experience. I thought I would be ashamed, but at the end we got to talking and I realized like that's when I found out like, oh, okay, she has like another job. She's like wants to build her business and she's doing this to pay off her home and she has a kid and everything, and I'm just like, okay, this is a real person and she's just doing this as a temporary job to make money to build the life that she wants. So from that perspective, I'm like, I feel way better now than I did in the beginning, because in the beginning I didn't know that much about her. And she showed up like in a car that just drove up and a dude driving the car and dropped her off and left. And I'm like, is it like her boyfriend? Is it her pimp? Like, I don't know how this works. But at the end, we spoke and I found out like, oh, it was just like an Uber basically. And she does this herself. She doesn't have a boyfriend or anything. Like it's kind of hard to have a boyfriend when you do something like this. But it's just like, I don't know. I feel good with how things went just because I'm like, I don't feel guilty. I don't feel like I took advantage of her just because it's like, hey, completely her choice. She's deciding, she's getting paid well for this. And it's like, okay, you know what? I don't feel bad spending money on that. Like, I don't feel guilty. And so, yeah, after we're done, take a shower, then go out, pay for the extra stuff that I had to leave the hotel, leave, and walk back. Of course, it was raining. On the way back, oh yeah, by the way, I didn't have time to eat during the day before that. So by then I'm like starving. So on the way back, it's funny, she actually just messaged me right now as I'm recording this. Anyway, so on the way back, I stopped, get a burger, delicious burger. Maybe it's because I had a lot of vigorous exercise and I hadn't eaten all day, but it was the best veggie burger I've ever had. Like double patties, really good, really tasty. I don't know, it was delicious. And anyway, eventually head back to the hostel, go to sleep, get ready to wake up the next morning to go to the airport, which I do, which it was today. So I go to the airport, and I won't go into too much detail. That's all going to be explained in the next video. But basically, my flight was delayed, so I ended up going back to Medellin and having the entire day with nothing to do. So I was considering just chilling at the hostel and recording this video, but I'm like, you know what? After booking everything with that other girl, I ended up doing some research and turns out there's websites for like hiring escorts and everything in Colombia because it's legal here. So I'm out of curiosity. I just did a little research and turns out that yeah, I overpaid a lot. But then again, you do pay for quality. So everything was like really nice, good experience, like and everything. But I'm like, I wonder what it would be like to, because I'm like, hey, I'm here. I did it once. Let's just, why not do it a second time and kind of test the other extreme, if you will. So found someone who was more like, I don't know, she was definitely younger. The first one was 28. Second one was 20. So I'm like, okay, she's a little younger. She definitely charges less. So I'm like, all right, let's see. And I show up there today and it was like not really a dump, but it's like, okay, you can tell like there's a bunch of girls like doing this and you go to the room and it's kind of like a little sketch and there's just like a a sheet on the bed and there's not really any stains, but there could be like that kind of place. And I'm just like, I don't know if I can do this, but anyway, she eventually shows up and it's like, I don't know. It's funny because in my head I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. Should I just leave? But the fact that I'm like, no, I told her I would do this, and I already like I'm here. It's just like I can't back out now. So anyway, she shows up and we do it. And in the beginning, I'm just like feeling kind of back. So I'm like, okay, she's really young. I don't know how consenting she is and everything. But anyway, at the end, we get to talking once again. And yeah, it turns out that she's actually from Venezuela. She came here with her family 4 years ago. And now she's in Medellin. Her family's in Bogota. And she's here pretty much for work doing that. And she's been doing it for 5 months. So it's like I didn't feel so bad after I found that all out because it wasn't like she was forced into it or anything. But I'm like, yeah, okay, this is more like the low end sketch. I'm not sure I want to do this part. So it's like I did it and I don't regret it because everything turned out fine. It's like everything, but I'm like, I don't think I want to do that again. So yeah, I had two experiences and I don't know. I still don't know how to process this. Like, I don't regret it just because, I didn't do anything wrong. Everything's legal. They're fully consenting. They were deciding to do this. No one forced them to do anything. And inside, I'm like, I feel like I need to experience this. But I don't think I'm going to do it again. Even though logically it makes so much sense. Because it's like, because the thing is, in Colombia here, when you go on a date, you're expected to pay for everything as the guy. Not just like the restaurants and the drinks, but it's like literally pay for her taxi from her place to the restaurant and then back to her place. So like literally you pay for everything. And it's happened that I've gone on dates, pay for everything, and it's like, oh, you know what? I wasn't interested romantically. This was just a friendly date. Because apparently that's the thing here. In Canada, when you go on a date, it's a date, it's romantic. In Colombia, when you go on a date, it can either be romantic or it can be platonic. I didn't know that. So I ended up going on two dates that I thought were romantic that weren't. And I mean, I have nothing wrong with against that. It's just first of all, I wasn't expecting that. And second of all, it's like, why do I have to pay for everything if this isn't a romantic date? I'm not saying, oh, I'm paying for this, so I'm expecting something in return. It's just, I don't know, it's weird. So I'm still getting used to the whole dating thing. So all that to say that dating costs a lot. I mean, everything's subjective, of course. The cost of living here is lower, but because I have to pay for everything, it is pretty expensive. And in general, you go on a date and nothing happens. So it's like you spend all that time, all that energy, all that money, and get nothing. Not to say sex is the only thing that's important, but still. And then you can go ahead and for like half the price of the average date, you can have guaranteed sex with someone who's really good at it. So even though like ethically and health related might not be the best approach, but I'm just like, it doesn't make sense to go on dates here. It just doesn't. Of course, like now that I've had this experience, I'm just like, I need more. I need like that connection, getting to know the person and not just having like a transaction. So I don't regret doing it. Very interesting experience, but I probably will not repeat it. Anyway, that was my insane, kind of embarrassing. Because the funny thing is, like I said, I don't regret doing this. But I, like yesterday when I'm like, okay, I know I'm going to have to record a video explaining this, I was afraid of how people would react, of their judgment. Even though now I'm recording it and I'm like, whatever. It's going to be out there, doesn't really change anything. Even if people want to judge me, who cares? I didn't do anything wrong. But yeah, that was the biggest thing. So, oh yeah, also it was very funny. After the first escort, on the way home, I ate that burger, and because I didn't eat anything all day, like I probably ate too fast, and I ended up getting a stomach ache, and I'm like, wow, I just, had sex with an escort, and I'm sick to my stomach, but not for the reason you would expect. I just thought that was really funny. So anyway, that was my story, and for the other story of why I'm here, just watch the next video. This is a pretty long video, but it was a pretty complex story. So, yeah, there we go. This is one of the, I don't know, I keep saying this, but this is one of the most intense adventures I've lived so far. But every time it turns out to be true. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm going to go get ready to eat because I'm starving. And I guess I'll see you next time.